Addirittura messo in fila, così sappiamo chi deve parlare. È tutto registrato. Sono già stato vittima diverse volte degli algoritmi differenti, quindi una posizione che deve pubblicare con la seconda per una foto pornografica. E la terza volta mi hanno bloccato per incitazione e propaganda.
So welcome to this very interesting, I hope, presentation. No, perché io sono abituato a strillare con una... È aperto? Sì. Quindi, welcome to this meeting, to this panel. So we are going to talk about big data and the tyranny of the algorithms. So first of all, in all the presentation of this kind that I've been part of, there is a confusion between what algorithms are and what data are and what a model is. So before we start our discussion, I would like just to make a couple of points about it. So first of all, there is a great confusion between artificial intelligence, big data, and machine learning. So artificial intelligence, by definition, is whatever you can do with a computer or with all kinds of machines that is typical of a human. And so, for example, automation, according to this definition, is artificial intelligence. So anything that you do automatically is artificial intelligence. And if you look at the boundaries of what has been going on for the last 2 centuries and so on, the number of things that we do with machines is increasing constantly. So, and that is, in its broader view, artificial intelligence. Now, what is machine learning? Machine learning is another aspect of human behavior, which is learning. And learning means looking at experience, looking at data, at what we can see around us, and distill information and distill way of doing things. Okay, so machine learning is something that does this instead of being a human, is a machine. And so most of the things that we see done today with computers is about machine learning. So when we talk about big data, is the huge amount of data that we collect every second, and that is almost always untapped because we don't have a means to analyze all this data. So machine learning helps us to make sense of a large amount of data. Now, what does it mean make sense? And here is the crux of the matter. So for large companies, that is, how am I going to use the data? So what I collect about your behaviors to make money. So for example, to sell advertisement, targeted advertisement, because advertisement is good if it reaches the people who are interested in the product that you are going to buy. So that's one way of considering. The second way in which you can use data is to make a judgment about a particular situation or about a person. So for example, we all know that, especially in the United States, there are tools that help you evaluating people for a job. And so they look at your past and what you post in the social places like Facebook, Twitter, and so on. And then they evaluate if you are a good fit for a particular job. Now that is dangerous because how do you know that the data that you collect is actually a fair representative of who you are? And so that is a dangerous use of data because then you get labeled and it's very difficult to unlabel you once you have been labeled that way. The last thing is about using artificial intelligence to drive cars, for example, autonomy. Autonomous cars with drones and these kind of things. Now that is, quote unquote, a good use if it works. Now the key point is that how do you make sure that it works? And so one thing that I say to my students in engineering, by the way, I'm Alberto Sangiovanni Vincentelli, I teach electrical engineering and computer science at the University of California at Berkeley, Silicon Valley. So it's one thing that you have to be really careful is to look at foundations and not to empirical use of things. And so if you want to use artificial intelligence or machine learning better to do autonomous driving, you better check that what you do is not going to kill people. Okay, so one of the things that we are going to discuss is the use and misuse, mostly, most of us are going to talk about the misuse of big data. Now, one of the key things that I encourage you, you are all very young, is that you have to develop critical thinking. Never get what they feed you as a God-given. It's not necessarily true. And so when you get, for example, an answer from the computer and do a Google search or something, don't stop there. Make sure that what you read and how you use this data makes sense. Don't take it as a God-given. So one of the points that I think that most of you are going to make is exactly this, critical thinking. And so don't put your mind at the use of the quote-unquote algorithms. Now, we said about data, we said about use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on. When we talk about algorithms, is really what a particular tool does based on the models that are built on the data. So data extract models with algorithms. Models are used to decide what to do, okay? So this is the way in which the chain of things connect from an engineering point of view, if you like. But now we are going to discuss not only this, but also the social aspect. And in particular, I would like to start with Paola Liberace, who is a partner of change and change management leader of RSM Italy Corporate Finance, and who has written a very interesting book that is called Economia della Memoria. So the economics of memory. And I think that some of the points that she's going to make are really fascinating. So, Paola.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Professor Sangiovanni Vincentelli, and thank you all for coming here today. Well, I'd like to start with a point Professor Sangiovanni Vincentelli just made about the fact that we are going to ask machines more and more, and we are especially going to delegate machines functions and tasks and issues we were accustomed to manage for ourselves. And that's precisely the point. When we talk about data and algorithms, we're talking about things that we were used to manage with our own human memory. That's exactly how memory works. Memory, first of all, stores data, just to use, say, an old model about human memory. But let's start from this. We store informations, then we process those informations, and we make sense out of those informations so that we can learn, we can judge reality, and we can make decisions. So that's precisely what in centuries we learned to ask machines, technology to do for us. Don't just think about computers. So computers are the later form of this kind of evolution, but the first mean by which we started asking technologies to substitute our memory in some way was writing. Writing is a powerful technology, and there have been many authors who have written about the power of writing, the power to store information and to give those information back to us without, say, any difference between the hardware and the software. You can, if you are able to read something that's written, you can't help doing it. It's natural. You look at anything that's written and you automatically are able to read it. Unlike what happens with contemporary technologies, so computer-based technologies. In that case, you can store data and you can retrieve those data, but you're not able to do that without the help of some hardware and software in the meantime. So I mean, it's very it's something that is going to change the way we retrieve informations and to change the way we possess our own information, our own data, the data related to ourselves. And we all have experience of this. If we just think about tons and tons of photos we just saved in the course of our lifetime, God knows where, probably on social networks later on. But first, when I was young, we used to do this on hard disks and USB memories. So it's all about memory. In our age, we are going more and more to sell and buy some forms of memory. It's not anymore just about storing data. It's also about processing them. It's also about learning from data. So Professor Sangiovanni-Vincentelli told you about machine learning. That's what we thought machines. We taught machines to learn. We taught machines to start processing and exploit that experience they made by processing data. And so machines are more and more similar to our human memory. I guess that is what scares us the most, because we perceive in some way that this shouldn't be this shouldn't be fair. This is not something that we can accept in our depth, and that's why we start asking ourselves if machines will be able, for example, in the near future, will be able to substitute human beings, to substitute them, for example, in decisions, in choices, in decision making, basically. And they, in some way, we fear that they can, assume our own identity, because memory identity are strictly related. And so fearing the most about our memory also means to be scared about our own identity. So my point is, I don't think that we should be scared. I think that all the tasks and functions we are going to delegate to machines are not, are just a little and a very little part of what our mind and our memory is still able to process, is still able to do, it's still able to create. And so we should take algorithms for what they are. That is something that helps us that helps us, working, that helps us reading reality, and helps us, especially when you talk about big amounts of data, they help us making sense of those data. But they, in my humble opinion, they are not going to substitute anything that the human beings are actually able to do and will always be able to do.
Thank you very much, Paola. So the next speaker is going to be Germano Dottori, who is a member of the Consiglio di Amministrazione, so Board of Directors of the foundation, which is called MED-OR, which I assume is Middle East.
Not only. It's the whole area stretching from Morocco to India. It's the larger Middle East, if you want, according to an old definition embraced by the US. I would like to go in the matter, but taking a different perspective, of course. I'm a political analyst and also a strategist, a person involved in what is happening in the world and trying to think about it. And I'm also social media massive user. And as such, I also experienced what algorithms can do and can interfere in the way you use social media. I've been a victim 3 times of censorship. First time, very lightly, I got a sort of alert, look, you did something that was not good. But what is interesting is that my impression, my take was every time, the all 3 times I was victim of that there is a certain superficiality in the way some algorithms are conceived. I want to say, first time I got a red flag, it was on the day of memory, last January the 27th. I put on Facebook a picture of the concentration camp of Auschwitz. And I choose a black and white picture with a huge of dead bodies. They were naked, but impossible to discern details. And Facebook told me, look, that is pornography, and you cannot. It's against our policy. Twitter, on the opposite, allowed me without any kind of remark. The third time I was, in August, even blocked for 3 days, because I put online a video showing the slaughter of some soldiers of the Afghan regular army that were killed by the Taliban. And they charged me of propaganda for terrorism. While my aim was exactly the opposite, because I wanted to show that it was not fair to say that the Afghan National Army didn't fight and didn't stand against the Taliban. Simply, most of them understood that they cannot oppose because the price to pay was to be killed in scores. That was. So this is personal experience I made. Now I go into what I could consider as theoretical considerations. In my opinion, social media are now a sort of contemporary agora. A contemporary agora which has replaced the physical ones we were using in the past. If you want to compete for power in politics and you want to make an effective bid for power, you need to be on the socials and to wage a campaign mainly focusing on the socials. Socials now is a tool of politics. That means that the private companies trying to make, rightly, profit from the management of the social media have become subject of political power, source of political power, that interact with the establishment and with the institution of each country affected by democratic competition. As such, each big private company is also exposed to political pressure by political parties in order to, how to say, in a way, manage the competition and setting also some standard of legitimacy. So far, without going to the point to legislate, which is bad, because legislation is an expression of democracy. Opaque, precious not. And if you manipulate algorithm, you can erase from political debate very huge group of political forces, which is very bad. This is the problem we are facing. In my opinion, the critical issue of the topic we are addressing today, big data and the dictatorship of algorithm, is this: the relationship between democracy and social media. This is. And there are two interconnected aspects, because big data is a big help, of great help to political entrepreneurial, because they can help a politician to have a profile of the people they want to be voted by. But on the opposite side, social media as the new public square are of political concern, especially for all those who want to manage democracy. And in my opinion, that's a risk. A managed democracy is not democracy. It's not democratic to ban a big politician from the social media because we don't like the message he's going to give. Of course, I'm thinking about Mr. Trump. It's not possible you have the spokesperson of the Taliban free to speak on all the social media and don't have the former president of the United States outside. This is simply undemocratic. Just that. So if we want to allow social media to ban people, I think that's an action that needs to be regulated by laws. Otherwise, democracy is abused, that is not democracy, not true democracy anymore. We need the rule of law also in the field of the social media. This is what I think. Otherwise, it's not dictatorship, but the global level of the freedom of speech is under threat. This is what I think, and as a political analyst, I think is the main issue we have to face too. One final consideration is because I would like to react to something I just learned about machines, the progress of machines, and the necessity to accept what machines are getting thanks to informatization and the progress of these new technologies. As a strategist, I can tell you that the new frontier on this is the robotization of war. And this is a serious risk because I'm not the only one to say, the first one to tell this was Henry Kissinger a few years ago in the latest pages of World Order. He was telling Henry Kissinger, the very day we allow artificial intelligence to rule military robots, we as a mankind are at risk. Because if robots or military machines learn how to kill and how to choose who to kill, we are all at risk, especially if they are able to self-learn. They can be empowered themselves. And this is something that is also, and we are at the Festival of Diplomacy, in my opinion, a very important field of concern for the international community, because this is a typical subject, it's a typical topic for international diplomacy to deal with a possible, with the aim to reach a global treaty regulating this subject. This is all I wanted to tell in as a first intervention into this roundtable.
Okay, thank you. So now we have Domenico Talia, who is a full professor at University of Calabria. So Domenico.
Thank you very much, Professor San Giovanni Vincentelli, and thank you to the organizer for this invitation. I am very happy to be here and also to listen the previous talk, the previous speech about the political role of algorithms, because the previous time when we met here 3 or 4 years ago, I don't remember exactly, my main thesis was that algorithms are one of the main political subjects in the first decades of this century. And perhaps at that time there was a surprise. The other colleagues look at me in a sort of curious way. But anyway, I'm totally agree with that position. And there are many, many facts and many trends also to support this opinion. So from my point of view, that kind of discussion we have today is very important because the role of algorithm is very important today in every aspect of our daily life. So they are not only a technical subjects, but they are creating a sort of hybrid era in which we live. So with hybrid, I mean there is a stronger and stronger integration between humans and machines. And every day, everything we do, or most of the things we do, we operate with our smartphone, with our computers, with a set, with smartwatches and so on, with a set of digital machines that interact with us. And in some way, obviously, they help us in doing a lot of things, but at the same time, they influence and make sometimes positive, another time negative influence in what we do. So this sort of hybrid era, hybrid years in which we live are posing us new challenges together, obviously offering new opportunities because they are very strong, they are very powerful. But at the same time, we need to realize that nothing is for free. So the benefits that we get, and every day we get benefits from technology, must be paid in some way. And that require a sort of, how to say, new feeling, new approach with this very pervasive, very impressive technology. So just to summarize this idea, I must say that in some sense, algorithms are building the future with us together, and they are playing a more and more important role in building the future of human beings. And that is very important for, in particular, for young people. So in this scenario, I would like to, how to say, focus on the role of those who design and produce widely used algorithms, widely used IT systems. So we are discussing about social media platform, about web contents. So most of them are managed by a very limited number of companies, of persons. So I think about Google, Facebook, Amazon, and so on. So there is a very strong concentration of power in a very limited number of people and companies. And this, is, I think, is a problem, because there is no real control on what they do, on how they change their machine learning algorithms, because we know that 10 years ago, perhaps Google and Facebook didn't use machine learning in their algorithms, and the algorithms were in some sense more objective. But today, every time that you search on Google, every time that you post something on Facebook, this platform collects data from you and provide you answers that are different, that are, how to say, built according to the profile of you that they obtain. And this is very important. So the concentration and in a few hands of this power, I think, is a problem. And in this aspect, on this side, politics is not ready. So I mean, governments are doing something, but they are not doing sufficient, how to say, legislation, regulation to limit this very big software power. So we are moving from soft power to softer power. And this is very, very important thing to consider. And often, as the example mentioned before, the use of algorithms produce disinformation, not information. So if you think about, there is a sort of economics of ignorance. So think about fake news, okay? So fake news receives a lot of attention, a lot of likes on the social platforms. But fake news produce ignorance. But this ignorance brings money, brings dollars to Facebook, to Twitter, so this is a sort of economics of ignorance. And this is a big problem for our society, I think. So this means that digital platforms and massive use of algorithms are creating new nations, new states, so new community that could be or are manipulated by an elite of technicians, of engineers, of designers. So I am a computer engineer, so I need to reflect on our role, on my role, personal role, and the role of algorithm designers. And it's time to consider not only the technological aspects, but also the social effect of what we produce, of what we implement, on what we design. At the same time, I think that it's the responsibility of people to be aware of the situation. So I want to conclude this, my first intervention, saying that we need more, how to say, education activities, education programs, training moments or training programs to help, in particular, young people and in general, citizens, to learn about these words. So technical terms like artificial intelligence, machine learning, Professor Sangiovanni Vincentelli mentioned before, deep learning and so on, must be communicated, must be taught, also, not only to engineer, to computer engineer, but to every student, to every university class. Because having knowledge, or in some sense spreading knowledge, I think it's an important duty, an important task. So we need to help education in this area, and we also need to push ahead to have transparency of algorithms. Thank you.
Thank you. Now last speaker today is Costanza Schubachanilia, who is the director of the Institute of Digital Geopolitics, and also is the editor of the Harvard Kennedy School Misinformation Review. So the misinformation review, right?
Yes.
Anyway, and by the way, since my colleagues have used more of their time, so I would like to end our round with your position statement, and then I would like to open the floor to questions from the audience, so that we can have some interesting debate going.
Thank
Costanza.
you. Thank you. And thank you for the Festival of Diplomacy. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I love to go last in panels, because then I can hear everything everybody else is saying. So in this case, it's really, really interesting, because you touched upon a lot of points that I wanted to make actually about the issues of democracy and social media, and about the fact that social media platforms are becoming really almost international actors, there is a crisis of sovereignty between governments and state actors and social media platforms. But I will not go so much into detail into this. Today, what I would like to talk about, so the work I do is on disinformation in general, and I take this from different perspectives. From a research academic perspective, I work with Harvard and also with Lewis University in a cooperation. I lead this project on influence operations in Italy, especially, but I also work with tech companies, and in particular for, the Wikimedia Foundation, which is a tech company and it's not. It's an NGO, is the NGO that hosts Wikipedia. So, and I also work with governments. And so the issue that we have here is obviously social media platforms have become really, really key into how our democracy works. And their algorithms also have become really key on how our democracy work. However, as some of the people who spoke before me, my fellow panelists said, there is not yet a regulation that is good enough, and that it has been developed enough. So many things are changing at this point. I think we are staring into the next 10 years will be the years where we really get to regulating social media platforms, but they are not yet. And so what is the problem with the algorithm? I like that we opened with an example on the algorithms trying to maximize advertising. So this is really the point of the social media platforms. As of now, we have a disalignment of incentives between the social media platforms and democracy and information. Because what the social media platforms are going for mostly is selling advertising, and so selling time. So they want people to engage as much as possible. They want you to spend as much time as possible on the platform. And disinformation is very, very good at that for a series of reasons. So false information is very good at keeping people on the platform. On the other side, for democracy, it is important, especially as social media platforms become really the public sphere, that we have true and reliable information. So the problem we have is that the algorithms the companies have decided that a good way to approach the problem of disinformation that they realize is a problem more and more, they have changed their posture. A good way to address this is through algorithms, and especially through machine learning algorithms. This is just not very effective. The machine learning algorithms are very effective for a series of issues like pornography, pedophilia, things that are really easy. But like, for example, the example that you were making before, where you had one platform saying, okay, this image is okay, and another platform saying this image is not okay. It's because machine learning algorithms are not very good at finding policies that are very, very, complex and nuanced, and they're very naive still. A colleague of mine always makes, yes, exactly. It's an oversimplification. And so, and also sometimes they really can't. I was saying a colleague of mine always makes this example that I think it's very important. Every time you have to, to show online that you're a human, you have to do a very, very simple task like finding, lights or something like that. And if you think about it, it's because machines cannot do that task easily now, right? But every human can do it. So it's not that the algorithms are not intelligent or not learning, but in a different sense that we think about learning or intelligence. And so, for example, I don't know, some of you might have seen, there is a new report from the Washington Journal, Wall Street Journal that just came out, and about Facebook algorithm. And it's really, really interesting. If you're interested in this, I invite you to take a look at it. And one of the things that they found out is, for example, the Facebook algorithm for a long time was not able, or maybe still not able, to distinguish between cockfights and car crashes. And it mixed them up somehow. And so, you see that when it becomes really, really delicate, like the example you were making, that it's a very subtle, the algorithm just is not able to do that. So then what is the problem? The point is, algorithms are very good at doing some things, and we should by any means use them. But it's like sometimes those companies have tried to solve an issue with tools without really understanding the issue deeply. And the issue of this information is that it changes. It's very dependent, very context specific. So it really depends on the culture of the place. For example, if some words will be offensive in a language, but not necessarily offensive in another language, the algorithms are more trained with bigger languages like English, for example. They're not very good with like smaller languages. And so the communities that are in other linguistic communities that have more, less training of the algorithm will even have worse results than that. So all of this, in my conclusion in this is just that algorithms are really, really important and we should use them. However, it is important that us as a society watch over these companies, even for what you were saying about these companies taking, a sort of responsibility that it's not democratically given, and shaping in really substantial ways the way we approach and see information. And, these companies sometimes have solved very effectively the issue of spam. And so they see, like most of you use emails every day and you don't have that much spam, I'm sure. And that was a big issue that has been solved by algorithms and technology. And so they're trying to do the exact same thing with these algorithms, but it's just a different example, a different problem. So anyway, let's use algorithms, but in a way that is guided by humans and by human interests. And that's my closing statement.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before I give you the podium, I would like to point some of the things that we heard so that could be items to discuss. Now we heard about algorithms. So most of us have said negative things, right? Except maybe Costanza a little bit. But something you cannot do without the quote-unquote algorithms, the way in which algorithms seep through data. One example, Google Maps. How many of you are using Google Maps? I guess everybody. I cannot even think to go around without using Google Maps, right? And that is indeed big data, right? Because also the shortest path, the collection of information, if there is a path that is blocked and all of that, that is a good thing. Another good thing is about healthcare. Now, we didn't touch upon healthcare, but doctors don't have the bandwidth to read papers, right? And the number of papers that we all in academia write is reached immense quantities, right? And some of that is really crap, to say the least, right? Something that you should not read, otherwise you get biased in the wrong direction. So what algorithms can do in this particular case is to sift through the literature about rare diseases, for example. Nobody knows how to deal with rare diseases. Fausto Coppi, the great biker, right? He got malaria, right? And nobody could, of the doctors in Italy, could detect that was malaria. Now it wouldn't be that way, you know, just because we have ways of associating symptoms to particular disease and going through a lot of publications. So these are some of the good things. Another thing that we expect from machines is to be perfect. Now think about driving, right? Driving. How many people die every year? Just one because of traffic accidents. Give me a number. Does anybody know? 1,200,000, right? Worldwide. Not in Italy, because I mean, knowing how we drive. So anyway, 1,200,000 is a lot, right? Is a lot. Is a lot. And well, we have one accident with a car which is autonomous. Is a disaster, right? Something the world collapses because the artificial intelligence stuff is bad. One accident versus 1,200,000 dead. You imagine the number of accidents that correlate to that, right? So now the point is, what is the right thing to ask of machines? Is perfection? We are not perfect. So why machines should be perfect? And so what is the limitation of perfection? Now, you were talking about, for example, the dying democracy. Now, what I think has died is the representative democracy. Nobody trusts a ruler any longer. And so everybody thinks that he has the right. Now, you talk about jurisdiction, right? The legislation. We have a big problem because people will not believe in the legislation. They would say that the legislation is done by someone who doesn't think like me, so it must be bad. And so this polarization about what is good and what is bad is terrible. I mean, we are losing democracy more for this rather than the algorithm. And then we have to ask again, training, and it's about critical thinking, and it's about judging the right from the wrong. And it is not easy to do at all because it's a combination of things, right? So now I would like to leave the podium to you guys, and wow, lots of questions. So she was the first one.
Good afternoon. I am Ekbal from Global Governance, second-year student. And regarding the ethical part of the internet, I wanted to ask you, since you said and enhanced the fact that we need regulations on the internet, and I very much agree on that, what is the role of the social media platform when it comes to fake news, especially when a recent episode was about Trump and Twitter. So he kept spreading fake news. So what should we do? And how should the social media and the platform behave in an ethical way without also damaging the freedom of speech?
Very, very good point. So anyone wants to take it? Costanza?
So I'll take this. So first of all, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna do this. I'm very particular on this. Fake news is not a very good term because it encompasses everything. It is a term that Trump himself introduced, kind of, and it doesn't really, get to the delicate differences between misinformation and disinformation, and malinformation is a different category. But for this, let's say misinformation is false information that is spread not with an intent really to, mislead. And so, for example, your aunt, all of us have an aunt who is a conspiracy theorist, but they believe in the thing, and that's misinformation. Okay, a little bit of that we can't avoid. Disinformation, though, it's false or misleading information. Sometimes it's true, but it's just spread to mislead. That information, it's spread with an intent to deceive. And that is what we need to work on. So what the platforms do, they've got much better at a lot of things. For example, they've got much better, and even the algorithms got much better at finding coordinated effort and the so-called inauthentic behavior, which means it's not humans. So it's bots or things like that. And that is one thing, so where the algorithm has been good. On the other side, we need more regulation from the government, and we need more internal regulation from the platforms. And we need more humans. And in this, also the platforms are becoming bigger. We need more humans looking at things and that content. And then we need, media literacy and all of the things that make society more resilient against disinformation.
You were second, then he third, and then the lady has been tongued fourth.
Thank you for the very insightful roundtable. It was very informative. My name is Noor. I'm a second-year global governance student from Tor Vergata University. My question is, the massive collection of data has been described as an attempt to create a universal human cortex. Now, through this collection of data and machine learning, consequently, machines will be capable of decision-making. Can machines learn the humane aspects of machine learning, like empathy? And if not, what are we exactly headed towards? And how can we prevent it? Because it sounds a bit scary. Thank you.
Okay, who wants to take this one? Paola?
Well, thank you for your question. Well, first of all, let me just suggest that we could perhaps, use a little bit more engineering in education, but we could also use a little bit more philosophy, because I guess more of the problems we raised here, more of those issues are related to philosophy. So is ethics, and so is also the problem of consciousness, which I'd suggest to take a look to the wonderful classes of John Searle, which has been one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century and still alive, fortunately. So I guess that the problem here is that we are still not fully able to define, to describe what human empathy is. And so it's very hard to teach those to machines as long as we just don't know what causes, what makes a human to be empathic. And so let's start from this point. We can only teach machines what we already know about ourselves. And that's why I'd say, I think I'm not among the pessimistic. I think I like to think of myself as an optimistic, because I think that we have an education issue. We have undoubtedly, we need training. I guess we need more training, but we also need training before regulation, I guess, because regulation comes later. And when we are talking about misinformation, we are still talking about people reading things they are not able to decode, they are not able to read, they're not able to put in the right context. And that's a matter of education, not about regulation. That's why I have to say I believe in human freedom. I deeply believe in freedom, and that's why I do not agree with the Trump ban. I agree it's been a mistake. It's simply because, but I think it's perhaps for the opposite reason, because anyone should say what I mean. We have Kim Jong-un on the social media, so we can also have Trump. It's not a matter of who is talking on the social media. The problem is, how are we reading social media messages? Are we relying upon our human faculties, our understanding, our ability to discern right from wrong? And that's, again, philosophy.
About fake news, just one little historical reminder. Witches, right? Was fake news or not? How many people died, burned, because of witches? And was that fake news? Yes, of course. There was religious power that were saying they're bad people, let's put them there. And they were governments too. Were governments too. No, then there was he was next, and then was her, then her, and her. Okay, go for it.
You put forth the suggestion that if you were to decide to ban or deplatform individuals from social media, it should be done through the usage of rule of law. And my question is that my name is Erin Demirtaş, I'm from Turkey, and Turkey and, for example, rule of law and democracy, like such terms are not very trusted, like disputed. So if you were to give governments that much power, don't you think it could be misused by the authoritarian ones, unlike governments which have democratic institutions, for example, the ones in Europe and North America? So my question is that, can governments be entrusted with that amount of power?
Se possiamo fidarci di tanta potenza dei governi che hanno tutta la potenza da parte loro. No, so we trust legislation, but we don't trust government.
If I...
No,
it's open, it's okay. Simply, democracy is also the right of minority to check the majority and the government. That means that nobody can trust governments if minority is able to demonstrate that the government is mismanaging its political activity and the whole political process. This is the very essence of democracy, in my opinion. But I would like to add some very short consideration about the problem of fake news, or as it was put by Trump, alternative truth. Alternative truths. Propaganda is old, like the history of man and politics. Intoxication of information is a classic weapon of political competition, both on the domestic field and on international arena. So there is nothing new about that. What is important is that now we have a global virtual arena. Everybody wants to be there and feel as it was empowered. And it's very sensitive an issue to allow people to be free to stay there and not to suffer from censorship. Because when a social media censors you, you are not able to defend yourself. And you suffer from a diminution of your freedom of speech. And this is something that, in my opinion, is a big political and philosophical, I agree, issue, because it's related to the limit of freedom, the content of freedom, and the way freedom can be exercised. And it's something that private company cannot decide on themselves. It's politics that should decide. But politics, I mean, not only governments or worst authoritarian governments, democratic governments, representative governments, I think. This is my point.
Okay, so there was a question here. Sì, tu.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Benedetta Beruk from Global Governance, second year. So firstly, thank you for your speech. I wanted to ask, you say that it is anti-democratic to ban someone from the platform, but in a case where the person is anti-democratic self, isn't it necessary? And I refer to the case of last year of Facebook banning Trump for 2 years. And that's my question.
Sorry, because I have a different opinion actually on this. So maybe we're gonna open up. No, this can be a big fight. Okay, no, I have a different opinion on this because from the point of view of disinformation, there are, sometimes we think disinformation, the bots, the fake accounts, etc., spread it, but in reality is the influencers, is the big influencers, and Trump was the biggest of all. So while I understand what you're saying, okay, well, it's not right to deplatform a person because that's, democracy. Everybody should have a voice. On the other side, I just want to, draw your attention on the fact that it's not such an easy answer, because on the other side, that person was really floating the common, the common arena, the public square with this information. And because of the algorithms, it's not like if we are talking, I say one thing, you say one thing, and we are at the same, in the same situation, but the algorithm will just push that information so much that it's really, unfair. And so I think the question then becomes, is it right that those public squares are the public squares now? Is it right that the platforms are so big and have such a huge power to influence and to decide who needs to be silenced, who need to be, pushed up? And so maybe I think the question is a little bit different. That shouldn't be the decider.
Just a short answer. Well, I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm just worried that we read in the correct way the facts, and I'm worried that we read, for example, the facts of Capitol Hill as something that in some way depends on social media use. I do maintain that it's not like that. Capitol Hill facts are something that depends on the responsibility of people. We should not forget that we have individual responsibility, and we use our judgment and our understanding to decide what to do. So this is for Capitol Hill, and this is always, and so it's just important to catch this point, because otherwise each and every one of us could always say, I've done this because I was influenced by. So again, philosophy, influence, and power are heavy words, the heaviest perhaps in politics. And so we should use them carefully.
Then there was a question over here.
May I add a few words, very few words, about one debate, one discussion, technical discussion, at least in the computer science community, but not only in the computer science community, about the opportunity of moderate social media. So moderation of social media could be an interesting, subject to discuss, not to ban people, but to set up some rules, common rules for everybody, so have a sort of etiquette for social media. Because if you think about the Trump behavior and also the ban as a reaction, I think it's just a sort of extreme behavior that was allowed by social platforms. So Trump it was an extreme example of forcing the social media platforms. And then the reaction was also extreme. And this, for me, means that this kind of sharing information is weak. So more structured ways, respecting everybody's opinion, should be found, perhaps will be found in the future. And among this, moderation could be one to be considered. Thank you.
But in some sense, if you look at the results of coming back to the philosophy issue, what is true and what is false? How do we define that? No, who decides? I was going to get that. I was going to get because there is
what is true and what is false.
that. If you look at scientific education, STEM education, right? What is the most important thing about STEM education? Is replicability. So you have a theorem, you have a physical principle, and you can replicate it. So it is, in some sense, a route to the truth that you can give. Now, in things where we don't have a proof, what do we do? What is right and what is wrong? What is true and what is false, right? And so, and it changes, right? It changes all the time. Huh?
Can be the technician or should be a politician or a judge? Question mark.
Question mark. But if you look, for example, yeah. But for example, in the United States, try to tell a lie to the judge. You go to jail forever. You know, they throw the key out. Now, try to tell a lie on social platform. You're applauded. You're the greatest man on earth. If you listen to what you want to hear, right? And so that's about the judge, the politician, or the common people, right? So it's a very different way of interpreting things.
But then again, I hope never to live in a world in which if I tell a lie, then again, I hope never to live in a world in which if I tell a lie on a social network, I go to jail. Because that, in that way, I think it should be worrying.
We should make a difference, right? So there was a question over there.
Thank you all for your speeches. My name is Camila. I'm a second-year student at Global Governance University, and I'm coming from Italy. So we were talking long before about the relationship between social media and democracy and the need for an actual legislation to regulate such a relationship. So do you think that the GDPR, so the General Data Protection Regulation, which is more a matter of privacy, maybe, which entered in force in 2018, right after the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which I'm sure you're very aware of, was a first step in regulating such a matter, or are we still very far away from this? So have we done some progress from the past in this matter or not? Thank you.
The GDPR, sorry, very quickly, I'm sorry. The GDPR, it's a great first step. More important than the GDPR, I think, is the DSA that has been presented by the European Union last December. And so the European Union, the Digital Service Act. It's more, it's less about privacy and more about social media regulation, and also disinformation, etc. The European Union in the past few years has started developing a complex system. And so it has some voluntary, the companies voluntarily decide to do some actions. So some companies have signed an agreement, not all of them, but like, for example, TikTok and Facebook and Twitter, those companies have signed an agreement, and so they are self-regulating. And now we're waiting to see how the DSA is going to work out. But it's a great first step.
I would like to add a few words about the fact that I agree with GDPR is a very important first step. So we are at the beginning of the process. But I think it's also useful to look at the worldwide scenario in which the role that the European Union is trying to play with respect to USA and China. So this is very important. I think it's a very, very important topic, this one, because in some way Europe is trying to use democracy and rules, democratic rules, to regulate this kind of new technologies. With respect to USA, that it's more, how to say, liberal. I don't know if this is the right word. Also because there are very important economic interests interest in USA because most of the companies are from USA, so they produce a lot of GDP. At the same time, the role of China is totally different because it's a totally different government, and the dynamics among these three poles, I think, is very, very important.
GDPR, I come from the United States, so I know this, but in GDPR, every single US company is using GDPR, and it was developing in Europe. How many European companies do you know that they are using to their advantage GDPR? Maybe 50%. And so that is something also very interesting, because you have a source of the potential advantage in technology, and actually other people are using it, right? So which is a sad story, but this points out also to the inefficiencies that we live through in Europe. So it's, you know, for companies, very good to have rules, by the way. So everybody says, oh, bad rules, the companies want to be free. But actually, if you have a reference point, it's much easier to optimize rather than being in the open space. And so companies are in favor of standards and regulation, as long as they make sense. They don't say, well, you have no right to exist, so we'll take all your possession and you are disbanded. That is the bad regulation for the company, but everything else is good. There was another question that and then that's it, because we are running out of time.
Sorry. Hello, everyone. My name is Beatriz. I come from Brazil. I'm a second-year student of global governance as well at the University of Tor Vergata. And my question actually goes a lot with what was asked before about regulations of social media and so on. And maybe going further with the discussion, I would like to ask why the agreement between the social platform and the users, it's not enough to tackle this problem, since the users, once they voluntarily enter in those platforms, they agree that they are not, for example, sharing pornography and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Funny one. Well, I mean, the self-regulation is, I mean, if you look at everything, it's like a contract, right? So think about privacy and the cell phone. Now, you know that if you have a cell phone, your privacy is down the drain, right? Because people will know where you are. So how many people will like to throw their cell phone away? Raise your hands. Nobody, right? So it's a contract. I give up part of my privacy in favor of a service. And that's the kind of things that you do when you use a social media platform. You give up something and you receive something in exchange. Now, the problem is when that something is asymmetric or is perverse, right? And so that's a different story, right? But in principle, that's a contract that regulates the use of something and what you are willing to give in exchange. For example, people at the origin, I remember, I mean, I'm an old guy, right? So at the beginning of the internet, right? Many of the services that we get for free, you had to pay for. And so now everybody is for free. Everything is for free, mostly. We get that. In free in what sense? Money. But what you give is in exchange of money, and you have to give something. Otherwise, the economics doesn't stay, right? You cannot ask people to lose money, right? Otherwise, it's not sustainable, right? And even governments, I mean, by that means, right? Otherwise, we go all bankruptcy. We're already out, but I mean, even more.
Well, I just like to suggest to take a look at an artwork made by an artist. I don't remember his name, and the title of the artwork is probably "I Agree." Well, that artist just printed the whole length of the agreement you have to consent, you have to sign when you just sign up for Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, and perhaps the last one was YouTube. And the whole length was like 100 meters. Yeah. So in different colors. So it's very impressive. I suggest to take a look at that.
Our boss, Giorgio, go for it.
Boss. Democracy is the right to justice. Now, let's take the case of that car that is self-drive, that is intelligent, that has an accident. Well, the victim has the right to be reimbursed. Is it a problem with the first programmer, or is it a problem from the machine learning that has become more sophisticated and it didn't work? And how much this victim has the power to get access to all the data and all the information of the algorithm to find out if it was a problem of the programming at the beginning, or if it was something that went on. Is it the machine that is going to pay the damages? Is it the producer? Is it somebody that made money out of it? Thank you.
Well, that is actually, I work with car companies for all my life. So even today, I mean, forget about intelligent machines. Suppose that your car blows up, right? And then you hit a pedestrian. Well, not clear, not clear. Yeah, but the point is that the production of the car turns around and goes to the guy who did the subsystem that was controlling the braking and says, your fault. So I'm not liable, you are liable, and so on. So it's the same mechanism all over again. Machine learning is nothing but a component. Machine learning is a piece of software, it's an algorithm, it's exactly the same kind of algorithm that you use to brake your car today. What is, do you know that when you put your foot on the pedal, you're actually not actuating the brakes? There is a computer between your foot and the brake. And that computer takes your input and decides what to do on your brake. That is artificial intelligence. Machine learning, sure. Because it learned that if you are on a surface that bumps, you have to apply brakes in a different way if you are in a smooth. And then you have a sensor that looks at the road and decides what kind of road you have. Same thing. It's just that people think differently because just the fact that somebody is making decision. Already we are making decision now. Is a different level, is a different level of hierarchy, right? And so it is where you place the level that matters in terms of liability. So who is liable? That's a key question. Who is liable? Who has to pay? And the second one is accountability. So who is accountable for what you have done? So liability, in my opinion, is the car, is the car component that makes the brake system. But the accountability is of the guy who wrote it. So he goes to jail and the company has to pay. Right? That's the difference between accountability and liability. Right? More or less. Any other question? Then we okay, last one, last question. So you decide among yourself. Pari o dispari? Non l'avevo vista però. Abbiamo suscitato un dibattito terribile. In teoria prima, dovevamo aver già chiuso da 5 minuti, però.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. My name is Irene Rosa, and I'm a global governance student. I want to ask that we know that platforms nowadays are enormous, and that sometimes they are used wrongly, for example, for bullying, harassments, and other kind of crimes. And since the area of law on this aspect in the specific social media is still behind and lacking specific regulations, do you think that, for example, asking people for their documents when they are subscribing to a social network could prevent certain actions from individual and moderates them? And do you think that it will be right in this case?
Who wants to take that?
Come again. Regulation matters. Regulation matters. Is the key. Sometimes I was wondering if people tweeting were all forced to stay on the platform with their names, they should behave the same way they behave. This could be the first rule. You are on the social media with your own verified name and surname. That's a rule to be established by law, in my opinion, because words matter, carry weights, and you have to be responsible. If you incite to violence, you do it in the square, you can be persecuted because of that. You should be liable to persecution also if you do so on the social media. But time and again, justice, jurisdiction, not the private company. That's a very important rule, and it's the basics, because it stresses personal responsibility. Sometimes I was insulted and blamed by people that began to discuss with me behind fake names. At the third or fourth answers, I told, listen, you lack of courage. You challenge me without having the courage to declare yourself who you are, who you work for, which kind of interest you represent. And that's not moral, in my opinion. I think overregulation is bad. But in such a field, some basic rules should be agreed at the political level and imposed as true laws. And people should abide to them. This is the first and most important thing. Just that.
It was a dissenting opinion.
I'm jumping on my chair. No, it actually, there have been a lot of research on if that would be a good way to regulate. And I would invite to think about the fact that, the internet and social media, they also opened up the public square for a lot of people who did not have a voice before. And, we were talking about authoritarian governments before. To ask for the ID of people to access social media basically would be to shut down and shut out of platforms a lot of people who found a voice. And in some cases, for some government, for some areas, it would even be very, very dangerous. It could be even dangerous for people who are activists, who are, LGBT activists, for example, all over the world. And so I don't think that this is the right answer for that. Even if we don't think about social media, just think if you've been in Rome for a while, you might know Pasquino, the statue, right? And it's a statue where people would put things, anonymous things, funny things or things against the government. And that was an important voice because it was anonymous and people could talk. And so I think that needs to be, respected.
Another dissenting.
No. Very, very quick. We are talking about the democracies. We are not talking about authoritarian regimes. This is the perimeter in which we are focusing on. Okay. So, in my opinion, if we live in a democratic system, you should be responsible. And the first criterion to be responsible is to be identifiable. Just that. Okay, North Korea is another case, Iran is another case. I understand this, but we are talking about democracy now, democracy and social media. So just with this caveat, I think you could agree on that.
Well, yes and no. For example, there are people who are under severe, look at the people who are followed by carabinieri and so on because the mafia wants to kill them. Right, and so for example, if you may have been attacked by someone, right, who is how to say anonymous, and that's good. But suppose that you are attacking a person with power, right, and you are saying right things, but you can be severely punished. So it's a double-edged sword. I am totally, completely open. My name, last name, telephone number, everything. But I recognize that sometimes it can be especially for the social issues like LGBT.
I want to say, I left my university because of that.
No, but even in our university,
I
mean, in all universities have a ombudsman, right? And the ombudsman, the people who complain about their professor or whatever, they are anonymous. I mean, their identity is protected. Whistleblower in companies, they are protected. Now, if indeed it's found out that that's the point. But
I was not protected at all.
Yeah, no,
because I was questioned by my university for a tweet, but not because of what I said on a tweet, but because of what many other people, unknown and anonymously, commented on.
Yeah.
No, this is, in my opinion, a red line. A red line. My freedom was abused by this man or woman attacking me anonymously without taking responsibility for that.
I mean, accountability and responsibility is
This
definitely
is a big issue.
important point. It's an important point. So sometimes you don't want to give voice to people that maybe didn't have a voice before, but thank God they didn't have it. Right? Yeah, Ku Klux Klan, you know, well, they are the same, right? So using his argument, Ku Klux Klan or Trump would be the same as Obama or somebody else, right? And so how do you distinguish, right? And that's again, what is right, what is wrong, what is false, and what is true, right? My God. Okay, guys, don't be negatively impressed by all of this. The world is great. What we were during the Middle Ages was worse than this because people died and cut their throat open. Burn, you know, the witch, right? Giordano Bruno, right? So, you know, now it's not that way. It may be worse in when the machines are going to take over and they are going to kill all of us. I know. It was tongue in cheek. Of course they are not, you know. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.